Okay, we are back. I'm very happy to have on the Goldstein on Gelt show Professor Peter Diamond from MIT. He's been there since 1966. He was also one of the 3 economists to win the 2010 Nobel Prize in economics on unemployment. Professor, a real pleasure to have you.
Glad to be on with you, Doug.
So listen, one of the topics that you've spoken about is the question of Social Security. Now, many of my clients, my day job is that I'm a financial advisor. A lot of my clients who live here in Israel live under Social Security. And A, the question they worry about is it stable? And B, the issue that they're really concerned about is this whole topic of the windfall elimination provision, which basically says that if they, let's say, lived in America for a few decades, paid into the system, and expected to get a certain amount, then they move to Israel and are able to get an Israeli pension, they may actually have their Social Security cut. Is that fair?
Let's start with the basic question of Social Security that you started with before we get into fairness. Is it sustainable? What's the future look like? The projections of the Office of the Actuary and the Congressional Budget Office say about 20 years from now, the trust fund will hit zero. Under the law that governs Social Security is not allowed to borrow. If the law isn't changed, then benefits for everybody will be cut so that the expenditures match the payroll tax revenue, which will continue rolling in. When people think there'll be nothing for them, they're forgetting the payroll tax revenue is there. So the current projection is in 20 years, everybody gets about a 25% benefit cut, and that would be a crisis. Crisis for lots of families, a crisis for the economy. And obviously that's not going to happen. Normal political process, the U.S. and elsewhere, is to not do anything about it until we get close to it. Mm-hmm. That is terrible policy. It's particularly terrible policy in the current context. It's terrible policy because the sooner one starts addressing a problem like that, the more you can phase it in slowly, the more you can spread it more fairly across different generations. And also the less the political pressures of people trying to defend what they have. Something that's not going to kick in for 10 years or 15 years just leaves the political process more scope without the pressures, the self-defense pressures. Mm-hmm. So I think right now would be a great time, political divide apart, for starting to phase in. It would also fit with our current problem. In my view, the U.S. has an unemployment crisis and a debt problem. A crisis is something you really need to address right away because the costs are large and keep mounting. Mm-hmm. A problem is something probably better to address sooner rather than later, but it doesn't have to be addressed right away. And Social Security fits in this beautifully because everyone always favors phasing things in slowly, and so you don't make the unemployment problem worse today by doing it, but by doing that, you have a big impact on the projected debt problems down the road.
Sorry, so you're just making a connection between solving Social Security slowly today and the connection that would have with unemployment now?
The problem we're having in the U.S. is fiscal austerity, which is hurting on unemployment today. And even worse, in something like the sequester, it's being done in a stupid, mean way. Cutting across the board, cutting good programs and bad programs. It's deliberately stupid. It was chosen to be bad policy in the expectation that it would lead to new reforms. It hasn't. Mm-hmm. And the idea that you sabotage the functioning of the government in the hope that it would lead to a better political outcome is just a terrible way to be going forward.
All right. So which way should the government be looking now? Because let's talk about politicians because they're real people. Dealing with unemployment is something that, except for perhaps some unusual number crunching, that's something that politicians have to deal with right now before the next election, whereas dealing with 20 years down the line, they will probably be long gone by then. So why would you, I mean, is it just a pipe dream? Why would you expect them to really think that far in advance?
I never for a second suggested that this has any real plausibility. I just want to keep the heat on. So yes, it's exactly what you said, and it puts the fault exactly where it belongs, on the voters. Voters don't tend to say, there's a real problem coming, it's going to affect me and my children, but I'm not going to hold it against the politician if he does nothing about it. That's the fault of the voters. It's an issue around Social Security. It's an issue around global warming. And the fault is with the voters. We need voters to hold politicians' feet to the fire more than we do.
That'd be excellent. We are talking with Professor Peter Diamond, the 2010 Nobel laureate in economics. He's been talking to us about Social Security. I'd like to focus on something that now strikes a little bit closer to home to me personally. I worked in the United States for about 10 years. I put in my 10 years into Social Security. I paid taxes with the expectation that I would ultimately receive a pension, albeit a small one. And then I started reading more closely my Social Security statement, and it said, if you receive a foreign pension, as well as other possibilities, then you will not get the full Social Security payment that it says in this statement. And then I ran through their calculator, and I discovered that I was going to end up getting about half of what I thought I should get based on the amount that I put in. Is this a normal thing for a government to do?
It's a totally appropriate thing, given the structure of Social Security, which is very unusual across countries. I've looked at systems in many countries. Most systems are linear. That is, what you get back relative to what you earned and paid taxes on is a linear function, same proportion across the board. Social Security is not like that. It has a progressive benefit formula. It gives 90% of your average earnings for very low earners. And then there's a second level and a third where it gets down to 15%. So the formula is progressive with the goal of giving a larger replacement rate to people who have had lifelong low earnings. And if you've had lifelong low earnings, your need for replacement is plausibly going to be much larger after you retire than somebody who has had high earnings his whole life. So the formula is directed more of benefits to people who are needy. So if, for example, you're a Massachusetts civil servant and you're not in Social Security while you're a civil servant, but you are in Social Security for 10 years, so you get a benefit, based on your lifetime average with a whole bunch of zeros, you look very poor, but you're not. So the same provision.
Sorry,
that
you're not poor
apply,
because you're going to be getting a civil servant
pension from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts.
Right, but that pension's only
and
based
you had
on,
and you had high earnings over your lifetime.
Isn't that pension based on what the number of years you put in as a civil servant, and then you get that piece, and then the piece you put in as a person paying into Social Security would get that piece.
The piece you're getting from the federal government, not from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, is based on whether over your lifetime you have been poor or not. If you haven't been poor, then you don't get the extra amount targeted on people who are poor. And if you go abroad and have high earnings abroad, I have no idea what you make, but you're in a field that pays well, then on a lifetime basis, you are not accurately depicted as somebody who had 10 years of earnings and then a whole bunch of zeros, never able to earn another penny and to accumulate a pension based on all those zeros. So the formula is set up to accomplish a social goal, and you are not part of that social goal. So you should be treated by the system the same way somebody with similar lifetime opportunities and achievements should be treated. The WEP doesn't do a great job of doing that, but we absolutely need something like that, or basically you are ripping off
but I don't understand.
the ability to accurately measure your needs.
So again, you're right, the math wasn't so clear to me. I was under the impression that workers put in, so that retirees can get out. Of course, now it's skewed a lot because originally when Social Security was founded, there were a lot more workers supporting a lot more retirees. Now it's more like a Ponzi scheme because you're putting in hoping that there's always going to be someone behind you to put in more when you retire. But my sense was
it's not like a Ponzi scheme. Let me just pick up right there. I hear that and it makes my blood boil. Any country that has national debt, is that a Ponzi scheme? Because it'll be future taxpayers that'll be on the hook for the national debt.
Don't you feel like
if the national debt was used for investments and the country is richer as a result, is it a Ponzi scheme? Of course not.
Isn't a pension like an investment? In other words, you're investing in your future?
First of all, there are investments that are like an IRA where you're buying assets and you're hoping they'll be worth a lot when you retire, and then you can live off it. Or you can be in a public program where just as your future wages depend on what the government does around public investments and the climate for private investments, you are part of a society that's looking after poor people, and it is part of the overall fiscal stance. The point of a Ponzi scheme, the way it was started, the way it's named after Ponzi, is it's deliberately cheating people to run off with the profits by the creator by paying out grossly unsustainable amounts to attract more investments. That's not what's going on in any pension schemes. Yes, some of them are badly designed. Some of them haven't got built into them the kinds of rules that will automatically give you sustainability. But what you've got is the forecast of the political process, just as you've got the forecast of the political process if you buy a treasury bond.
So, again, just to clarify then, the point of Social Security, and I guess maybe we should simply look at the name, is that it is Social Security, and it's really only designed for poor people.
No, I didn't say that. What I said was it's a program to help everybody, because a lot of people up and down the income distribution don't save enough.
But disproportionately to help the poor people. In other words, that's
disproportionately. It has really two goals. One is normally labeled consumption smoothing, and to help people do that. It comes as a real annuity. You want to go buy a real annuity in the market? What kind of prices are you going to pay for that? It comes as a real annuity. It's part of a package up and down the income distribution. But it has a second goal, which is relieving poverty among the elderly. So we have two different goals here: consumption smoothing over your lifetime, when you may or may not have saved well. Even if you saved enough, you may have invested well. Even if you invested well, you may have been clobbered by the financial crisis. Mm-hmm. And also to do more for people who have been lifetime poor.
Okay.
And doing both of those in a single program leads to a complexity that leads to lots of people not understanding what's going on.
All right, so I certainly appreciate you clarifying that for me today. I think it is more complex than I had going into this. We've been talking with Professor Peter Diamond at MIT. He's the 2010 Nobel laureate in economics. Professor, I'm very sorry because I'm enjoying the conversation. In fact, I have a lot more questions, but we are just about out of time. In the last few seconds, could you just tell me how can people follow the work that you're doing now?
At the MIT Economics Department website, there is a page for each member of the faculty. And on that page, I post articles as I write them, both the technical ones for the economics community and a variety of other pieces that I think may be of interest.
Okay, so we will
Google me, and the lead item is my page at MIT.
All right, we'll put a link to that at the show notes at goldsteinongelt.com. Professor, thank you very, very much for your time.
Thanks, Doug. It's been fun.
You've been listening to the Goldstein on Gelt Show with money maven Doug Goldstein. Doug's weekly radio show is heard around the world, but if you miss it, you can download the podcast at www.goldsteinongelt.com. The Goldstein on Gelt Show gives you up-to-date financial ideas so you can get on the path to financial freedom. If you'd like your questions answered on the air or off, send Doug an email to doug@profile-financial.com. It's your money for your future, so join Doug every week to build your wealth on the Goldstein on Gelt Show.